From Michelin, we will hear Andermyr present about how Michelin really goes deep dive into how they will make sure that they by 2050 will have 100% renewable or recycled resources in new tires. They describe the whole process and the importance of taking responsibility for future tires and also future driving.
Hello, my name is Andermyr. I am the sustainability manager with Michelin in the Nordic countries, and I've been invited here today to present to you a little bit about how to create a more sustainable tire. Thank you very much for this invitation. I really appreciate it, and looking forward to sharing this topic with you. We don't have a lot of time, so let's dive right into it. Okay, let's go. How can we create a more sustainable tire? Well, firstly, we need to understand that the car industry is undergoing monumental changes, or the vehicle industry, we should say. This is mainly user-driven, so it means that the drivers of vehicles are aspiring to greater comfort, more equipment, technology on board, which is leading to the vehicles becoming more technological, larger and heavier than before. And at the same time, we need to look after the climate emergency that we are facing and address creating more sustainable products. Now, when the car industry or the vehicle industry is changing, it has a direct impact on the tire business. This means that vehicles, for instance, are becoming heavier. It means we have to create tires that can carry this load and this weight. We have more unpredictable weather. In Europe, for instance, during a single day, you can have dry roads, you can have wet roads, you can have snow or ice that you face, and the products have to be able to cope with this. We have the electric boom that is occurring, and as well, the need for reducing environmental impacts is also, of course, critical when it comes to tires. So it's a huge aspect of different characteristics that has to change in order to make this effective, and it's really a challenge. So firstly, what should a sustainable product strive to be? We believe that a sustainable product has to firstly reduce its environmental footprint. Then we need to look at sustainable materials. We need to look at responsible logistics and manufacturing. We have to look at providing recommendations for proper and reasonable usage of the products and services, and as well taking care of collection and end-of-life valorization of the product at the end of life to assure that we can use the remaining raw material for something useful. Now, there are many different aspects we are working on, and many questions and demands are coming from our customers, from NGOs, from authorities, and from decision makers that want to change and want to have an insight into and a way to reduce the impact of tires. There's a lot going on here, and we have, as a consequence, we are working on several different areas, and you can see some of them here on the screen. I cannot go into all of them, but I will try to explain a little bit more about what actually is behind the environmental impact of tires and how we can reduce it with all these initiatives that are ongoing. We try to assess the environmental footprint of a tire, and when we do so, we use a life cycle analysis. Here it is simplified in 5 stages. We have design and raw materials, manufacturing, logistics, collection, valorization, and usage of the product, altogether making up the life cycle. This is based on a 16 criteria of the product environment footprint, so we're taking all of those into account in this life cycle analysis. Now, when we start to look at and try to understand the weight of those different impacts inside the life cycle, we instantly see that the usage phase is really the biggest one. At 84% in average, it takes a huge part of the tire's life cycle. Design and raw materials stands for 13%, manufacturing 1.5%, logistics and collection and valorization are less than 1% each. Why is it so? And what are the key parameters? Well, firstly, if we look on the design and raw material stage, which stood for 13% of the impact, here it's firstly important to choose the right type of material, because that can reduce the environmental impact if we are using less harmful materials. Then the design and the mass is critical, because if we design products that last longer, we will need to produce less products. And if we can reduce the mass, it's the same impact, but a bit differently, that we can reduce the weight of raw materials needed and produced. So going to manufacturing, we are working on all those different aspects of manufacturing in order to reduce the impact there. Logistics, we are working on transporting less, transporting differently, and transporting better in order to reduce the impact of logistics. And then in the valorization phase at the end, of course, we are working on projects to recycle tire materials and to put them back into the material stage. So we do full circle, so to speak, and projects are ongoing there. But the usage phase then, why is it so important, and why are we spending a lot of research and development there? Well, tires have a rolling resistance. And rolling resistance, if you ever try to push a car, you can feel how heavy it is, and that is because the tires are deforming against the surface, and they create a resistance and a heat buildup, which is causing increased consumption of energy when this vehicle is moving. And for a passenger car, 20% of the tank of fuel will be consumed because of this rolling resistance. So that's how important it is. And then you can imagine, if we can reduce that rolling resistance of the product just by a few percent, it will have a huge impact on the fuel consumption of the vehicle, and thus the environmental benefits that this product can provide. So that's really, really important. The second most important stage is the longevity of the tire, because the longer the tire lasts, the less tires we have to produce, as I explained before. Then we have particle emissions, which are as well key. Particle emissions are inevitable from tires, because tires need to create friction against the ground. This friction is there for acceleration, braking, and cornering, and safety against the road. And when the tire has this friction and abrasion against the road, particles are released. And here our focus is to reduce, firstly, the number of particles, which is why we were very supportive of the Euro 7 legislation that's just been passed on particle emissions from tires. Here we need to reduce the number of particles, and secondly, we need to change the contents of those particles from the material side, in order to assure that in the future they can be 100% bioassimilable, which is our objective. So if we then move to electric vehicles, will everything change for the better? Yes and no. If we move to electrical vehicles, 100% electric vehicles in the park by 2030, we can reduce the impact by about 20%. Because the European energy mix on that time will not be 100% renewable energy. So it means that what we have to do, we can reduce then by 20%, and the usage phase then stands for still above 80%, because there is still some burning of fossil fuels to create the electricity with which those cars will be charged, and there's as well particle emissions on the tires, and we still have the longevity aspect and all those things. So it means the usage phase still is more than 80% if we would move to 100% electric cars in 2030. But if we extrapolate until a scenario in the future where we have 100% renewable energy, what would it look like? Then the usage phase would go down to 45%, as you can see on the graph on the right side, and the raw materials would increase to 45%. And for that reason, it's extremely important that we start now already to work on the raw materials side in our products even more, and to improve it as quickly as we can. And what do we do really to answer to that? Well, we need to work on renewable and recycled materials now. The time is now. And even if we looked at 2030, we looked even further into the future, there's still some time. Why are we in such a rush? Well, just to explain that these projects take a huge amount of time. We had initiated a project in 2012. It's called Bio Butterfly, where we in 2023 were able to release the first kilogram of biological butadiene, which we can use in tire production. And so it's more than 10 years time for a project such as that. And you can imagine all the projects that we have in these areas. There's several of them that need to come and go hand in hand in order to come to a state where we can have more renewable and recycled materials in our products. So we need to start early, and we need to work already now. A tire is composed of more than 200 different materials. It's one of the most complicated composite materials that we have created by man. So we have inside among those 200 components, we have textiles, we have additives, steel, we have synthetic rubber, we have natural rubber, and we have fillers of different kinds that we need to combine in order to create this product. And in all those areas are we working and having different projects, joint ventures, initiatives in order to improve on the material side. There's a huge amount of work going on in many different areas on these aspects. And how far have we come? Well, our ambitions and commitments. Today we have roughly 30% renewable and recycled materials in our tires, and we have the ambition to reach 40% by 2030 and 100% by 2050. So it is a challenge, but we are well underway, and we believe that we will be able to produce tires with 100% by 2050 to this day. And that's why we're starting early. We're working progressively on all these areas in order to get there in due time. Now, so what really does it mean? If we then have sustainable materials in our products, does it mean that they are more sustainable? Well, there are three criteria that have to be met for us to be able to say that. Firstly, a tire has to reduce its environmental footprint. That's key. Secondly, it has to be able to maintain safety while reducing the environmental footprint. That's another aspect we will not budge from. And thirdly, we're not talking about prototypes here, that those tires must be able to be mass produced, because otherwise we will not have the benefit of those materials inside them to the full extent. So those three criteria are really key for us to consider that the tire has become more sustainable. All right, that was it. Thank you very much for your time. And if you have any questions, please shoot. Or feel free to contact me if you have any more questions. Thank you very much.
And we do have Richard with us online, and we see if we can have him up on the screen as well. So I would like to stay with the one question about the recycling part, and especially the valorization when you're in the end of the tire's usage phase. Then it begins again, as I understand it. And the question is, of course, what are the type of projects you're working on when it comes to the valorization, and what are the potential to reuse the material in the tires for a new tire? What are you working on there?
There are several initiatives. I would say the main one is to extract carbon black from the tires and turn it into recycled carbon black that we can put back into tire production. There's also oils coming from this process. So those are two aspects where we can extract materials that we can then use into production. Of course, it's a scientific process, and we are working progressively on it, testing and evaluating the processes, because as I mentioned, we need to maintain safety characteristics and all other aspects, and we must be able to mass produce. So this means that it's an ongoing process that will take some time, but we are working to deepen our knowledge in all areas concerned.
On a personal level, I'm very impressed with what you have been presenting here, because it's a total mind shift from if I go 10 years back. So I'm impressed by Michelin and your work going forward, and we love to follow you. So thank you so much, Richard.